last week's interest rate relief flows through to homeowners, those in strata communities are being urged to reinvest in ageing infrastructure. The Strata Community Association says of the 368,000 strata schemes registered by London, so that means nearly half are over 26 years old, and that's the peak time for remedial repairs. For more, I spoke with Strata Community Association's New South Wales President, Robert Anderson. Robert, first of all, why is now a good time, with interest rates coming down again, for strata committees to review their financial obligations?
I think that what has happened over time is that a lot of the housing stock in strata, in residential buildings, is gradually getting older. And while we hear all about the new builds and building defects, there's probably 80% of the schemes in New South Wales and certainly in Queensland and Victoria are over 20 years old. So they actually need the obligation of an owners corporation is to repair and maintain. So they need funds, and there's an obligation to have a Captial Works Fund plan, but there's no obligation to put the money aside that the Captial Works Fund plan suggests. So now, rather than spending that money, it will be a good time for owners corporations to build up their Captial Works Fund plans, because there's been a lot of renewal and replacement required. Window replacement, the aluminium windows we always thought would last for 25 years. They've lasted for 50 years. So a lot of buildings have got to the end of their lives, and waterproofing membranes and so on and so forth. And if you've got a lift, the lift's life's now 15 years, and it's $300,000 to do an upgrade on lifts. So it's better to put a little bit of money away every quarter than to try and get a special levy when people may not have the funds available.
So maybe for those owners or investors that are new to strata living or strata investing, right, and may not really understand what a Captial Works plan is, can you run us through what the point of it is? And do you have any stats about whether or not strata managers or building management are adhering or not to updating these Captial Work plans?
Yeah, well, firstly, Captial Works Fund plans are compulsory in Queensland and in New South Wales. The Act requires them to be updated every 5 years. So it's the owners corporation to review, because they set the contributions once a year at the AGM. And in New South Wales, the government Fair Trading has now got what's called Strata Hub. So they've been collecting data on how much money is in Captial Works Funds plans. But I've been in Strata for 30 years, and done some locum work more recently, and seen Newcastle and parts of Sydney and the Gold Coast as well. The schemes do not have enough money. On the Gold Coast, for example, I had 5 schemes that needed new roofs, and they simply didn't have the funds. Whereas the intent of the Captial Works Fund plan is to put money, if a roof lasts 20 years, you put 1/20th away every year. So typically, many schemes are underfunded.
And what about those 10-year work plans? Aren't there also a scheme to look forward and look ahead as to how much money needs to be put aside for future works?
Yeah, that's what the intent of those plans are. Now, those plans are theoretical. They're not. It's not an exact science, and those plans also don't include some important things such as fire safety upgrades. So they're not in there, and so many buildings have had fire orders on recently, or they will have in the future, because in New South Wales they're updating the legislation next year, and there's going to be significant costs. So it's in owners corporations' interest to put money away in these Captial Works Fund plan and start preparing really better because one day we will have a recession, and it's much harder then than it is now. The other thing is the cost of doing those repairs. COVID proved that the costs go up more than CPI. And it's always, if we can do them now, it's cheaper to do them now than it is in 3 or 4 years' time.
Isn't the real challenge, though, the balance between how much do you put into the works as to having too much in that fund?
You can never have too much, but of course, owners would say, "Look, the money's better in my pocket earning interest than an owners' corporation's fund earning no interest." But it's not exactly like that, because the schemes can put the money in a term deposit, and the interest rates, like at the moment, it's 3.9% for 12 months, better than inflation. So really, that argument's a false argument. And it's not fair on if someone moves into the building next year and they need a new roof and money hasn't been put away for the last 20 years, it falls on one person instead of the other person living in there for 19 years hasn't had to contribute. So there's an unfairness of not contributing to Capital Works Fund plans.
And so finally, as a resident or an investor, as interest rates are coming down, right, how should you approach your strata and building managers about this?
I think it's proactive is the right way, and owners, it's in owners' interest to be proactive, because they should. Like, I know that they're saying prepare for a rainy day, but don't ever. We've been very lucky in Australia that housing prices have generally gone up, but that's an assumption that you can't use into the future. That of course there'll be a recession at some time, and there was one in the early 90s, and it was severe. And then schemes won't have money. At the moment, with the interest rates coming down, and we expect them to come down again, it's a perfect time to allocate some of those savings into the strata levies.
That's Robert Anderson there from Strata Community Association, New South Wales.